Let me begin by saying that the capitalist market is giving birth to a progeny. It's called the sharing economy on the collaborative commons. And this sharing economy on the collaborative commons, this is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the early 19th century. So even though it's young, it's a remarkable historical event. I won't need you in here on this. At this point in time, this very nascent sharing economy on the collaborative commons is flourishing alongside the exchange economy in the capitalist market. And they're flourishing with each other. And I should say that capitalism, the parent is going to be transforming this child. But as you know, if you're parents, children often transform the parents as well. So capitalism is going to have to nurture this baby, let it grow, let it breathe, let it develop, let it mature. And in the process of this relationship, capitalism itself is going to be utterly, fundamentally transformed over the next 35 years. By mid-century, 35 years from now, I believe that the capitalist market will flourish. In many ways, it will be unrecognizable from the form we have today. But it's going to have to share the stage with its progeny that's now matured in a hybrid economic system, part exchange economy, part shared economy, part capitalist market, part collaborative commons. We're going to have a hybrid economic system fully matured within 35 years. The triggering agent for this great economic transformation is a digital technology revolution that's going to take us to near zero marginal cost across wide sectors of our commercial life. Now, of course, marginal cost is the cost of producing an additional unit of a good or service after we paid our fixed cost. In the business community, we're always in search of new technologies that can increase our productivity, reduce our marginal cost, so we can put out cheaper goods and services, win over consumers and market share, and bring some nice profits back to our investors. In fact, in classical economic theory, the optimum market in capitalism is where we actually sell at marginal cost. It's just that none of us ever anticipated in our wildest imagination, in the whole history of capitalism, a technology revolution so extreme in its productivity that it might actually reduce marginal cost for some goods and services to near zero, making them essentially free and abundant and beyond market forces. The zero marginal cost phenomena is now here. Entire industries have been disrupted in the last 15 years. But let me back up for a moment and provide historical context. There's been 7 great economic paradigm shifts in history. Forage and hunter societies, early agricultural pastoral societies, the great hydraulic civilizations, predatory empires, feudal societies, market economies, industrial capitalism. And what all these 7 great economic paradigm shifts have in common is that at a certain period of time, 3 great technology revolutions emerge, converge, and create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform, a completely new way to organize economic life. New forms of communication to more efficiently manage economic activity, converge with new sources of energy to more efficiently power economic activity, which in turn converge with new sources of transportation to more efficiently move economic activity. When communication technologies, new energy sources, and transportation modes come together to create a new infrastructure for organizing economic lives, it's a game changer. Let me give you 2 examples. The first industrial revolution, 19th century, second industrial revolution, 20th century. First industrial revolution, Britain. The Brits moved from manual printing to steam power printing, and they put online the telegraph. Those communication technologies converged in Britain with cheap coal, powered by steam engines, and then they put the steam engine on wheels, locomotives, on national rail systems. Communication, energy, transport, new general purpose technology platform. 20th century, second industrial revolution, United States of America. Centralized electricity, Mr. Edison. And then Alexander Graham Bell introduces the telephone. Later, we have radio and television. These communication technologies converge with cheap oil from Texas, powered by internal combustion engines. Then Henry Ford put cars, buses, and trucks on national road systems and brought us into the 20th century. That second industrial revolution took us through the entire 20th century, and it peaked, actually, in July 2008. You remember that month, that's when Brent crude oil hit a record $147 a barrel on world markets. And in July 2008, when oil hit that peak, all the other prices for all the goods and services that we normally consume were so expensive that purchasing power shut down all over the world that month, and we went to the Great Recession. That was the economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later was really an aftershock. We are now in a long sunset for that second industrial revolution, where every time we try to regrow the economy, oil prices go up, other prices go up. When we hit around 118 a barrel, purchasing power shuts down. Oil prices then go back down again. There's no economic activity. When they trough out, we try it again. So we are in a stage of a mature stage of the second industrial revolution. I'll share an anecdote. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the very first 2 weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs. When I got to Berlin, my first question, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy or the EU economy or the global economy in the last stages of a great industrial era where the actual platform has exhausted its aggregate energy efficiency and productive potential? Centralized telecommunications, fossil fuel and nuclear energy, internal combustion engines on dumb roads. We cannot get much more productivity out of this system. It's exhausted. So even though right now we're having a debate around the world about austerity and fiscal reforms, market and labor reforms, all of which are essential, but they're not sufficient. Because as long as we're stuck in this 20th century platform, there is no way any country in the world is going to be able to move in to a new era of prosperity. It will not happen. We are on the cusp of a third industrial revolution right now, a new convergence of communication, energy, and transport. The communication internet is just now beginning to converge with a nascent digitalized renewable energy internet and a fledgling digitalized automated GPS-guided transport and logistics internet to create three internets in a super internet of things: communication, energy, and transport. And sensors are now being embedded in every device, every machine, every appliance across the economic value chain so that we can send data back to these three internets in this Internet of Things. We have sensors in the agricultural fields, the factories, retail stores, warehouses, smart roads, vehicles, smart homes, and they are beginning to send data back to this emerging Internet of Things platform. By 2030, maybe 100 trillion sensors, we don't know. But on the upside, this is going to be a great leap forward for the human race because we now have a technology platform that is going to allow us to digitalize every aspect of life so that the human race can come together and begin to think as one human family living on a single planet. On the other hand, there are terrific challenges here and obstacles. How do we address the question of network neutrality? How do we secure privacy and data security? How do we prevent cyber terrorism and criminal behavior on a mass scale? These are huge questions. In my new book, The Zero Marginal Cost Society, I spend many chapters on the challenges and roadblocks. But let's assume we can address these very troubling issues. Here's what this Internet of Things platform allows us, this digitalization of communication, energy, and transport. We have 3 billion people now connected to the Internet. We're going to have everyone connected in a few years from now. We now have a Chinese smartphone for $25. So all of us connected to the Internet can go up on this fledgling Internet of Things that's already emerging, and have a transparent picture of what's going on in the economy as sensors send big data across the value chain to the Internet of Things. That means if you are a small business, a medium-sized company, a cooperative, a nonprofit association, a neighborhood group, a government, or just a prosumer, any one of us now can go up on this Internet of Things platform that's emerging and have a transparent picture of everything going on in the economy. And we can take our own sheet of the value chain. Maybe our value chain is our neighborhood association or our small business or our government agency. Take our sheet of the value chain, watch the big data coming through to the sensors to the Internet of Things, and we can use our own analytics, create our own algorithms, our own apps, to dramatically increase our aggregate energy efficiency at every step of conversion on our value chain, dramatically increase our productivity at every step of conversion on our value chain, and dramatically reduce our marginal cost so we can be competitive world-class in the global capitalist market. And in some instances, we're going to be able to reduce our marginal cost to near zero so we can shift some of our economic activity from the capitalist market, the parent, to the new sharing economy on the collaborative commons, the progeny. When people read the Zero Marginal Cost Society, before they read the book, they say, this sounds like it's way off in the future. I'm always amused because the zero marginal cost phenomenon brought on by digitalization has already completely wreaked havoc on some of the biggest vertically integrated industries of the 20th century. We now have 3 billion people on the internet. At any given time, they've been prosumers, and they're producing and sharing their own music at near zero marginal cost on the communication internet, bypassing the music industry. Hundreds of millions of young people are producing and sharing their own YouTube videos, no copyright, open source, and they're sharing it at near zero marginal cost on the web, bypassing the television industry. Young people are producing and sharing their own news blogs, their own social media, zero marginal cost on the communication internet, and they're bypassing the newspaper and magazine industry. And now massive open online courses, 6 million students taking near zero marginal cost courses, taught by the best college professors in the world, zero marginal cost, and they're getting college credits. So some of the biggest industries of the 20th century have literally plummeted in 15 years since Napster introduced file sharing of music. The music industry is a shadow of itself. Television cannot compete with YouTube videos the kids are producing and sharing for each other at zero marginal cost. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business. They can't compete with the blogs at zero marginal cost. Book publishing is now shrinking because of free ebooks, and universities are rethinking their business model. However, there's been an assumption here that there would be a firewall. And while the zero marginal cost phenomena may have devastated the information, entertainment, and knowledge industries in the virtual world, that zero marginal cost phenomena would not cross over the firewall to the physical world of atoms, the brick and mortar world. What I say in the new book is that that firewall has now been broken. It's called the Internet of Things. When the communication internet converges with the renewable energy internet and an automated transport logistics internet, the human race can begin to produce its own solar, wind, and green electricity at near zero marginal cost, share it on an energy internet, and produce and share goods and services and distribute them on an automated transport and logistics internet at very low to zero marginal cost. This is the democratization of economic life. The precipitating agent is digital technology brought to communication, energy, transport. Let's look at Germany. The first day I was with the chancellor, I laid out this plan, and the chancellor, much of this plan, the chancellor said on the first night, I want this for Germany. Here we are 7 years later. In energy alone, Germany is now 27% solar and wind green electricity. Germany will be 35% solar and wind electricity before 2020. And the fixed costs of solar and wind technology are on an exponential curve, just like computer chips. You know, a solar watt used to cost $68 to produce in the 1970s. Yesterday, the New York Times reported 4 cents per kilowatt hour for a solar watt. And if you saw the front page of the New York Times yesterday, it said that solar and wind is now the technology is as cheap as coal and gas already in many regions of the U.S. And while those prices are going up for fossil fuels and nuclear, solar and wind are on an exponential curve where the prices are going towards zero. So the inevitability of this is actually built into the exponentiality. But in Germany, once you pay for that solar panel and wind turbine or geothermal heat pump, the marginal cost of generating that energy, near zero. The sun is not sending a bill in Germany. The wind is not sending a bill in Germany. The geothermal heat coming up from the ground is not sending a bill in Germany. It's essentially free. Just keep your solar panel clean, your wind turbine clean, your geothermal heat pump clean, once the fixed costs are there. So this is now a reality now for Germany. And what's interesting is who's producing the new power in this digitalized world where you can produce it and then share it on a beginning of a digital energy internet. We have 4 big power companies in Germany: EnBW, Vattenfall, RWE, E.ON. These giant vertically integrated enterprises, these huge power and transmission companies of the 20th century, have suffered the same fate in 7 years as the music industries did in the last 15 years: newspapers, magazines, book publishing. The vast majority of the new electricity, the green electricity, is being produced by millions of small players who come together in electricity cooperatives and laterally scale with the digitalization process. We have farmers and neighborhood associations and small and medium-sized enterprises across Germany, actually in Denmark too. They created electricity cooperatives. They get low-interest loans from the banks. Everyone's gotten the loans because the banks know they'll pay with the savings on the energy. And the vast majority of this electricity is being produced by small players in laterally scaled cooperative networks. And the big 4 power companies are producing less than 7% of the new power. They're out of the game. These giant vertically integrated enterprises can't scale millions of small players. Does that mean that there's no role for the power companies? No, but they're going to have to change their mission. Increasingly, tens of millions, then hundreds of millions, and then perhaps much of the human race within 25 years on these exponential curves will be producing our own solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, hydroelectricity locally in our homes, offices, factories, neighborhoods. That exponential curve, just like computer chips. We've been on a 20-year exponential curve. So what's the role of the power companies? They'll need to erect and service the digitalized energy internet. Just like the Googles and the Facebooks and the Twitters created the commons, if you will, digitalized commons that allow millions of people to produce and share their own news and videos and entertainment. Other industries were disrupted, but Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. became financially very successful by erecting and managing these digital commons. So we say to the power companies, your new role, you erect and manage this digital commons. If you don't, the ICT industry will, maybe the telecom companies, maybe the cable companies, maybe the ICT companies, maybe the prosumer electronic companies. There's many industries that can manage this digitalized energy internet. But we say to the electricity transmission companies, your new mission will be to set up partnerships with thousands and thousands of enterprises. And you will manage the big data coming through their value chains and use analytics and algorithms to help all of your clients increase their efficiencies across every conversion in their value chain, increase their productivity, reduce their marginal cost so they can stay competitive in this new digital global marketplace. And then those clients will share their productivity gains back with the electricity transmission companies. So in this new model, there's actually more money to be made by selling less electricity and managing productivity gains. Again, if the transmission companies don't do it, maybe the ICT companies, telecom, cable, a lot of companies can do this, electronics companies, etc. 3D printing. We now have several million young hobbyists who are setting up startup enterprises all over the world. They're 3D printing their products. They're taking on the vertically integrated manufacturing companies of the 20th century. It's still very early. They're all sharing the software. This generation, the digital generation, is totally open source, and they're sharing the software. And the young people are using their own recycled material for their filament. They're using garbage. recycled paper, recycled plastic, recycled metal objects. They melt it down. The software builds up the 3D product. Some of the fabrication labs in France and other countries are beginning to power their facilities with their own solar and wind technology off-grid, near zero marginal cost energy. And some of the fabrication labs are beginning to use electric vehicles to transport those 3D printed products, either the capitalist market at low marginal cost or the sharing economy at near zero marginal cost. And within a few years, those electric and fuel cell vehicles, they're going to be 3D printed with redistributed recycled materials. The first car is already in production. It's called the Stratti. It's being produced this fall from Local Motors. And within 10 years, those vehicles that transport those 3D printed products will be using a transport and logistics internet with GPS guidance, and those vehicles are going to be driverless. Again, near zero marginal labor cost. This is coming in the next 10 to 14 years on the transport and logistics internet. It's a revolution. Now, President Obama wants every school to have a 3D printer in the next few years, but in the next 10 years, every school child is going to have a 3D printer in first grade, along with their little iPhone, and you're going to see a whole generation in first grade on, Skyping in global classrooms, hundreds of millions of kids, becoming just as savvy in creating free software to produce physical products and share much of them in a sharing economy on the commons at near zero marginal cost, just like their millennial parents grew up using software on the communication internet to produce and share virtual goods and bypass some of the entertainment, news, and knowledge industries. The best way to understand this revolution is the automobile. The automobile was the centerpiece of the second industrial revolution. We built the whole economy on it. But the digital generation, they don't want to own automobiles. That's grandma and grandpa automobile ownership. They want access to mobility, not ownership of the vehicles. The digital generation moves too quick to want a clunky car that they own in the driveway. So we now have millions of young people who are going up on the emerging Internet of Things platform, communication and logistics, GPS guided. They're sharing vehicles right now, millions of kids. And I'm going to say to you today, ownership of vehicles is never coming back. This generation, their children, their grandchildren will never own vehicles again. They're going to be car sharing on an automated and soon driverless GPS-guided system, electric and fuel cell vehicles. For every car shared, 15 cars are eliminated from production. Now, Larry Burns, you may know, was the executive vice president of General Motors until 4 or 5 years ago. Larry Burns has just done a study of a middle-sized U.S. city, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And he said, even now, at the beginning of this digital revolution, Internet of Things, we can eliminate 80% of the vehicles in a dense urban area with car sharing right now. Now, think about the implications of this study. We have 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks holding down massive traffic jams and polluting the planet right now. Larry Burns' study suggests that we can eliminate 80% of those vehicles in the next generation with car sharing in dense urban areas. The other 200 million vehicles, 20% that are left, they're going to be electric and fuel cell vehicle. They're going to be running on renewable energy from a digitalized energy internet across their region. They're going to be 3D printed with recycled materials. They're going to be driverless on smart roads. It's a revolution. The best way to understand this revolution is toys. And I see we have a lot of parents and some grandparents here today. You know, traditionally, a parent brings home a toy and they introduce their child to property and markets. They say to their little 4-year-old girl, we bought this toy for you. It's now your property. It's not your brother's toy, not your sister's toy, your toy. Take care of it. So the little 4-year-old is getting her first introduction, not my brother and sister's toy, power, status. She's got something someone else might want. She's being introduced to the idea of property as value and scarce. But now we have a new generation of millennial parents in my country and Europe that are going up on these massive toy websites with shared toys. You pay one subscription fee, you get a credit, you're in the system. They're bringing the toy home to their 4-year-old daughter. Now, I should say in 10, 12 years from now, that toy is going to be coming by a drone or a driverless vehicle at near zero marginal cost on a smart digitalized transport network. But right now they're bringing that toy home and they're saying to their 4-year-old, this toy another little girl enjoyed and had a lot of fun with, and it brought joy to her. So she took good care of this toy because she knew one day you'd want to play with this toy. And so you take good care of the toy because one day another little child will play with this toy. This child is learning that a toy is not a piece of property. It's not a status symbol. It's not a possession to defend. It's simply access to an experience for a moment of time. And the child's responsibility is to steward that toy so it can be sent back on the website so other kids can share that toy as an experience. This child's getting ready to share the cars, share the apartments and homes, share the clothes, the tools, share much of their life on a sharing economy at near zero marginal cost on the collaborative commons. How is this revolution going to impact the industries in this room and employment? Because employment is high, productivity is low right now, economies are not growing. We're going to have to build out this Internet of Things platform across France and across the world in the next 35 years. This is going to engage virtually every existing traditional industry: telecom, cable, electricity transmission, ICT, electronics, transport, logistics, manufacturing. All of these industries have to be engaged in the build-out. So in France, we have to transform the entire energy grid from fossil fuel and nuclear power to distributed renewable energy. We're going to have to retrofit all the buildings in France to make them energy efficient so that we can turn them into micro power plants and install solar and wind on site. That's going to engage lots of construction business for 40 years and lots of semi-skilled workers to do the insulation. It's labor intensive. We're going to have to transform the entire electricity grid of France from a servo-mechanical dumb grid to a digitalized smart electricity internet. Who's going to lay down the underground cable? Lots of unskilled, semi-skilled workers. Who's going to erect and manage that electricity internet? Maybe ERDF and the transmission companies, maybe the telecom companies, maybe ICT. There's now a scramble going on in corporate boardrooms on who can find ways to begin to service, build out, and manage these new internets, the energy internet and now transport and logistics internet. Then we have to take the whole transportation sector of France and transform it from internal combustion engines on dumb roads to electric and fuel cell vehicles on smart roads. We have to put in power plugs on every parking space to connect our vehicles to the grid. We have to completely change transportation and create a digitalized transport and logistics internet across France, Europe, and the world. That brings in the transport and logistics companies with ICT. So the layout, the build-out of an Internet of Things platform in every community of every country in the world over 35 years is going to bring all the industries to the floor. It's going to employ millions of people. Once the system is in, however, it's smart, it's intelligent, it operates with very small workforces, and we will see a fully automated capitalist market probably by mid-century. When that comes, we have last 2 generations of massive labor to build this infrastructure out, 2 generations, massive labor. But when it's built out, we're going to have to see new kinds of employment. We are already seeing a migration of employment from the capitalist market, which is automating, to the social economy. And the social economy is where the new employment is going to be by mid-century. It's already a big migration because the social economy is where you have humans producing and sharing all sorts of things with each other. Machines can't do it. Healthcare, education, environment, culture, sports, arts, it goes on and on. This is the fastest growing employment sector. In my country, the US, it's 10% of the employment. In parts of Europe, it's already 15% of the employment. It's all sorts of services in the nonprofit sector where you're paid fees for services rendered. It's a self-sustaining sector. So in the long run, we're going to automate that capitalist market. It's going to run by small workforces. It's going to have low marginal costs, be very competitive. A lot of our activity, however, is going to merge over to the sharing economy and the collaborative commons. Lots of employment there as well in managing those commons, again, in the social sector. Well, the big question here today, you're asking, who's going to pay for this investment in infrastructure? I just came back from meetings with the new European Commission and the leadership of the Parliament. I met with most of the new leadership 2 weeks ago. A week before that, I met with the Beijing leadership. I'm working with both jurisdictions. And of course, the big questions in both Beijing and Brussels is, show me the money. Let me show you the money. In the European Union in 2012, we spent 740 billion euros, public and private investment, on infrastructure. That's nearly $1 trillion in 1 year, 2012. So we have massive investment going on in infrastructure, but it's new old. Meaning across Europe, we are pouring massive amounts of public and private funds in shoring up an old, dysfunctional, matured, sunsetting second industrial revolution platform, centralized communication, fossil fuel and nuclear energies, which have maxed out, and internal combustion engines on dumb roads. There is no way to grow the French economy, I guarantee you, or any other economy in that system. Can't be done. So what I said in Brussels 2 weeks ago to the new leadership is, look, if we just reprioritize existing infrastructure investment, no new investment, and take 25% of what we spend each year on public and private infrastructure, 25% of that 740 billion euros, and ensure that it's earmarked in every community of France and all over Europe to the new infrastructure, the Internet of Things platform, communication, energy, and transport, we can create digital Europe. And that, my friends, is going to be the new theme of the European Commission. I've been working with the Commission on this, digital Europe. This is what we're going to be seeing unfold beginning in January of 2015. This is going to engage all the industries in this room and all the conventional industries. This is the next stage of the EU journey. We had the coal and steel community, and France led the EU. And then France led again with the Euratom project. Then France and Germany led again with the Maastricht Treaty for a political union. And then the Euro for a monetary union. And then the enlargement to a geographic union. The next journey, digital Europe. Lay down the Internet of Things platform for a digital generation. Bring young people back to work. Engage all the industries. Last but most important, when I wrote this book, The Zero Marginal Cost Society, my publisher said, you can't publish a book with that title. I mean, really, no one's going to read a book called The Zero Marginal Cost Society. I said, we're going to have to do it anyway. And the reason is I want every grade school teacher in France, in first grade, when the child comes to school, to introduce that child to zero marginal cost. Because zero marginal cost is the ultimate metric for reducing our ecological footprint and addressing the real issue facing our planet. The real issue, the only issue of any consequence to the future of the human journey is climate change. Climate change is absolutely terrifying. And the reason we don't understand it is because we're never explained what climate change does. Climate change changes the water cycles of the Earth. We're the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the water cycles of the Earth. The problem is, for every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this planet from climate change, the atmosphere sucks up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat throws that precipitation up there, and we get more concentrated precipitation in the atmosphere. The result, more violent water events, absolutely more violent winter snows, more dramatic spring flooding, more prolonged summer droughts, more Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. Our ecosystems cannot catch up with this runaway water cycle. Our scientists now tell us, if you're a parent, this is what you want to know here. We're now in the 6th extinction event of life on this little planet. We've had 5 extinction events in 450 million years. And when it came, they come quick. A turning point in the chemistry of the Earth and massive die-off. On the average, 10 million years to recover biodiversity, new forms of life. Our scientists tell us we are now in the 6th extinction event in real time. We could lose up to 70% of all forms of life on this little oasis in the universe by the time your little children are my age at the end of this century. My wife is right. We're not grasping the enormity of this moment. What does this have to do with zero marginal cost and the digital revolution? The digital revolution takes us to a zero marginal cost society with communication, energy, and transport, meaning that at every stage of the value chain, the digitalization technology allows us to optimize our aggregate efficiencies at every step of conversion of every value chain, optimize our aggregate efficiencies and productivity, which means we minimize the use of the Earth's resources. It's extreme productivity. Optimize the aggregate energy efficiency, every value conversion, every economy. And that allows us to dramatically reduce our costs, because if we're minimizing the use of the Earth's resources, we can produce at very low or near zero marginal cost. Then, if what we do produce at near zero marginal cost, if we share our vehicles, share our homes and apartments, share our clothes and tools and toys on a sharing economy, on a collaborative commons at near zero marginal cost, it means more of us are using less of the Earth's resources. We are creating a circular economy. Nothing goes to the landfill. So the ability to digitalize communication, energy, and transport and create 3 new internets is going to allow us to manage economic activity, power economic activity, move economic activity, and that digitalization process will allow us in every single conversion of every value chain of every industry to optimize our aggregate efficiencies, reduce marginal costs, reduce our ecological footprint, and hopefully create a more ecological society in time, maybe, to address climate change. So there's going to be a Paris talks here on climate change in December. I was here in 2007. President Chirac asked me when that last climate talks happened to come in, and the question was, what's the business plan? No one seemed interested. What I'm saying to all of you today, we go into those Paris climate talks in December, and what's missing is the narrative for a new vision for the economy. So every country going to those talks, when they hear that they have to have carbon taxes or reduce their carbon print or increase their efficiencies, they think it's a punishment. And every country says, not me, you first. What's missing is a new economic vision for those climate talks that can see the possibility that those benchmarks are goals to success, not punishments to failure. The digitalization and the Internet of Things platform would allow us to very quickly move to these goals by creating a more sustainable economy, putting people back to work, engaging all of our industries in the infrastructure rollout, allowing a young digital generation to use their talents and creativity, and hopefully create a more ecological society. The government leaders that I advise around the world, I always ask them at a given moment, if this isn't a plan that makes sense from a business perspective, you tell me what your plan is. Step up and tell me what plan B is to create a more sustainable ecological society and engage the human race. And I always get silence. Because plan B, whether it's in France or any other country, is to stay in the old 20th century second industrial revolution that's moving us to an economic deadlock and a climate abyss. I'm hopeful finally in France. I just came back from Lille. And some of you know that my global team, which is made up of over 100 ICT, transport, logistics companies, architectural firms, we are doing a rollout in Nord-Pas-de-Calais. We're in our second year contracting with President Pecheron and President Vasseur, the President of the Chamber of Commerce. We just vetted programs last week, 5 billion euros a year, the next 20 years. We are laying out this Internet of Things platform in the oldest industrial region of France right now. Thousands of businesses have been mobilized there, over 3,000 businesses, all the universities and public school systems, the civil society. And I will say to you this evening that Nord-Pas-de-Calais is going to be a flagship that's going to allow France to begin to become a leader in this third industrial revolution. We brought in our French companies in this group, Bouygues and ERDF and EDF and Renault Nissan and Schneider and Rexall, etc. They're all at the table helping us do that. They're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but they're determined to also be in the third industrial revolution so they can make this transition over 30 years into a new era in history. I'm confident because, and my last words here, France should be leading this revolution. No one knows more about France than energy, your big energy companies. No one knows more about construction than your big construction companies like Bouygues. You are world-class in ICT, in electronics, in transport, in logistics. France and Germany should be joining together, and together creating a partnership to create digital Europe and show the world what it means to move on a new journey to create a more sustainable and a more democratic and a more just society so we can re-heal the planet. Thanks for taking time to be with me. I appreciate it.